Doug, innovation, as you know, I mean, my gosh, in business, personal development, I mean, we hear it constantly. I just feel like it runs aground sometimes. And so that's why you're here. You're the expert. You're going to help me figure this out. You ready?
We'll see how that goes, but
Okay.
I'm sure we'll have a good conversation.
Okay. Well, so, from a business standpoint, I mean, we all know the stories, and I'll have to say, your book is so fun to read because you have so many stories. It was interesting to me. I learned some new things in there just from the stories that you showcased to show the analogies for your points in there. But we all know the ones. I always think of IBM. Here's IBM. They were the kings of the universe. They did not innovate. And we know the rest of the story, and they got overtaken by, those who were innovating. So we hear about that in business stuff. But I think here's what gets me from a personal development standpoint. So here I am. I'm Kevin. I'm a person. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm dealing with my own wellness or lack thereof in myself, which affects my business. So to me, it's all one big thing. And there's this propensity, of course, to find what works, right? Can we just find what works? And I feel like my innate tendency then is, if it works, why can't that just be good? And I wonder if people are going along, and that's what's so hard, because we feel like if it works, we found something, oh my gosh, we got the results we wanted. And shouldn't we be able to stay there? And yet what you're showcasing in the book and what I'm seeing even in my own life is maybe not, but that feels like a rub.
Yeah, I mean, because there, I think what you're highlighting is we've only got so many hours in a day, and we've
Yeah.
only got so much mental, emotional bandwidth.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, if this thing works, why am I gonna like try to like mess with this, what can sometimes feel like alchemy? Like when our life is working,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like we have struck gold.
Yeah.
Why in the world would I tinker with that? Um, and I think it has something to do with the fact that it's embracing what I think is, this is my point of view, a fully orbed picture of reality,
Okay.
which is, just because it's working now, a fully orbed picture of reality knows that doesn't mean that it'll work tomorrow. And the more that we study culture, the more that we study human development, the more that we can even, I think, with a pretty fully like transparent way, we can say, and we know it's not going to work that much longer because of how fast culture is changing, and thus how fast we have to change.
Okay. Well, that was literally my next point. You stole my thunder there, was asking you about change. Cause when I look at, here I am in a culture that is changing. And you point that out too, that I've read this in a couple of books lately, that the change is happening at such a dramatically fast rate. So that's happening in the culture. Now let's take the roles that I have. I have a marriage. Well, I'm not the same guy that married my wife 28 years ago. She's not the same woman. So we have changed. That's going to require some response. My kids, I mean, anybody who has kids knows that. I mean, you got a kid who's 5 and it's one way. When he's 10, it's a different. When he's 15, dramatically different. And if they're 25, whatever. So they're going to change. How can I parent the same way? Work and business. And then myself, I have changed. And even that, I've looked at that, Doug, and I exercise has always been easy for me. And yet,
Good for you.
yeah, I'm
That
one
has
of the,
not always been as easy for me. So
I'm one of
I feel great for
those people.
yeah.
But it is. So that's an area. I wish I was could say something good about the financial area of my life. It's a train wreck, always has been. But exercise has been, but even there, man, I just get bored. I just get bored. I get bored with my diet. I get bored with the exercise. And it took me a long time to let go and allow myself to have a season and a cycle and to realize, man, I was a pro cyclist. I love cycling. I just don't feel like riding a bike. I don't. I went a long time not doing that, but it was hard not to hold on to that holy grail of something that had seemed to work. And so as everybody's listening out there, and they've striven, if that's a word, but
Yeah.
they have strove so much to achieve a result. They found it, they've got something, and then either it's not working, or I wonder if they're also realizing, I'm tired of it, but it's hard to let go. And again, you're saying, well, that's the need for innovation.
Yeah, but I think some of this is, I had a mentor say this a couple of years ago, did a lot of work around this, but it's like, you have to know yourself to lead yourself. And some people, I think, are able to really compartmentalize certain parts of their life in a healthy way, where for whatever reason, they are going to eat granola and yogurt for the next 15 years, every day at 6:15 a.m. They're going to hop on their bike and they're going to ride for 75 minutes. And that is what their life is going to look like for the next 50 years. But then there are going to be other aspects of their life that are continually changing. And there are some people that just need constant change to keep life interesting and vital and alive. And I think one of the mistakes that we can make is we try to figure out like this one size fits all approach to what habits are going to look like, or what innovation is going to look like, with parenting, marriage, business, health. There is no one size fits all. It's got to be, who are you and what does it look like when you are most fully alive? And I think there's a lot of judgment and shame that we can bring to other people and to ourselves when we're like, you're not doing it right. Well, it's like, I don't know what right means. I just know I need to be honest about who I am and what works for me and doesn't work for me.
Do you find yourself, now I know you work with, churches specifically a lot, but with businesses and then with people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stick on the people side for a little bit here, but I do want to hit those others as well. Because I feel like they're more easily tangible. It's with myself, it's with self. When I'm looking at the areas of my life, do you find yourself in your own life and with those that you're working with of looking at going, okay, well, you said aware. I mean, this requires awareness. What are the areas in our lives? How are we doing there? So there's an audit there. And it's one thing to look at the area that's not working and say, well, obviously there's a good opportunity for innovation. But let's talk about the area again that is working. And I guess I'll ask you to make a case for questioning innovation. Do that, questioning the need for it, like that. How does somebody know? Is it time for me to question what's going on and look at innovation now, or at least be ready to pivot when the time comes?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my central thoughts around this is that innovation, particularly within the life of a leader, is a muscle. And so it is like any muscle. Like, I'll give you an example. So like, we have a boat, right? And we just got a knee board. And my kids are not old enough quite yet where they want to wakeboard. They're terrified of the idea of skiing, but they've taken to kneeboarding pretty quickly. I used to be really great at it, like really, really great. But it's probably been somewhere between 15 and 20 years since I got on a kneeboard. My dad went out with us. My dad and my mom went out with our kids on Saturday or Sunday, and we went out. I was like, you know what? I want to get on this thing. So I got on it. And it was a bit like getting on a bicycle. Like, I could do all the same stuff, but suddenly like there are all of these muscles that I have not worked out in a long time. And I lasted a good 15 minutes and then was like, I think I'm done. Like, I'm just not forever, but for that day. Cause it's like the muscles that are needed are completely different than the muscles that I have been working out. And then I woke up on Monday and I think I got run over by a tractor trailer. Right. Particularly in my hamstrings. It's crazy. Like, I'm just not used to working out those muscles. I do think innovation is the same way. I worry for some leaders who are going to be resistant to wanting to change things, that when change is needed, and that will happen. Like, you will have to change something at some point in your life and in your leadership pretty consistently, let's say like every 3 to 5 years, significantly. The muscles aren't going to be there for you to do it. And that's my worry. It's not innovation for the sake of innovation. It's what happens when you need it and you don't have the muscle, because innovation is a skill set. Like, you can learn to do it, but what if the skill set isn't there for you?
Okay, you got me a minute ago. You got me thinking about resilience. So if I'm going to be resilient, I need to be. Now we're in a time right now. I mean, we're recording this in July of 2021, still amidst the pandemic, however you label that or define that at this point, but still there. And we saw that. I mean, you saw it. We all saw that, especially in business. Those who were I mean, I know so many business people, small business especially, so many of them, and some pivoted, to use that word again,
Yeah.
and some did not. Now, granted, there were some industries where it was easier to, I think, than others. So I can't put everybody in the same bucket. But what you're pointing to is if you're the type of person who is not innovating, who's found something that's working well, but you've just stuck with it for so long, when the change comes that's going to be forced on you, which it probably is at some time, like the pandemic, something we can't control, do you have that, yeah, resilience, that muscle? And that, you saying that pulls me to thinking, yeah, we've all got to be practicing this.
Yeah, and I'll give you a practical example from business. It's slightly higher up. So my wife is the chief strategy officer of an advertising shop. And so they were actually, I think last month, just named the #1 advertising agency in the United States.
Wow.
And when the pandemic hit, she and their executive team, the CEO, the COO, CCO, and her, they were kind of polling what other executives were doing around the pandemic, and almost exclusively it was, and we're talking March, April 2020. It was, we have no idea what impact this is going to have on advertising. Let's wait and see. And their response was completely different, which was, let's go bring out 5 to 7 ideas to every client we have of the ways in which, like, they could choose to invest. I won't use the word pivot, but like,
Okay.
embrace the moment that they find themselves in. And rather than let the pandemic happen to them, what if they tried to, whatever wave we're on, let's see where this thing takes us. And as a result, they saw a huge wave of not just investment, but new revenue that was coming in, both for their clients as well as for them personally as an advertising shop. But I think the reason they were able to do that wasn't because they made a decision in the moment. I think it's because in the culture, there was already muscles for, we are going to be proactive.
Yeah.
We are not going to let business happen to us. We are going to make our own waves. And I think those are fundamentally different approaches to both your personal life, your leadership life, and your business life.
Yeah, I was thinking an ad shop. I mean, it's such a breeding ground for creativity to begin with. That should have been the first place we all turned to say, okay, pandemic hit, my business is, shut down nearly. What can I do?
Yeah, I mean, like, and one of their clients is DoorDash, who has had a pretty meteoric rise in the last 18 months because of the pandemic.
Yeah, great
But
timing.
it could have been a different story. It makes sense now that a home delivery food service would have would be able to ride it differently. But there were other home delivery services that chose different paths during the pandemic. And one of the reasons that they were successful is kind of the proactive choices they were making.
Yeah. Well, looking at business, I mean, you go through a lot of examples in the book. And of course, the place to look at innovation, I think that brings us to it, like you talked about, is that change that's forced upon us. So when you're in an industry, when you've got a business and something is not working well, and right now, of course, this book came out for you because you were looking at churches. Pandemic hit, nobody's going to church all of a sudden because they couldn't. So we've got that issue. Now, even though things have opened up at the current time, I'm not up to speed on the exact stats, but my understanding is a lot of people aren't going back again. So you got an entire industry that has been derailed. So they are forced to look at that. But a lot of people have, and I'll be frank here. I mean, podcasting is really tumultuous right now. There's so many big players coming in that I'm going to say my peers, which are people with, decent sized podcasts, but we're not top of the list. The experts are telling us that, even the one I hired, that across the board, we're seeing about a 30% decline. Most podcasts are, because of these big franchises, powerhouses coming in with celebrities. And there's just so many new shiny objects to look at. So we can sit and be upset or get out of the game or figure out innovation. I mean, isn't that where you see most of the requirement of innovation, I guess?
Yes. I mean, in some ways, the answer to your question is all the things that you said before it. I think one of the things that I do look at a lot is that I do think we're really good. We're really good at observation, but sometimes we're really bad at interpretation. So there are things that the landscape of our world has shifted, and then we're looking at cause and effect. But sometimes I think we're learning the wrong lessons. So like in church world, what's happened is all of these people had to they shut down their live worship gatherings, right? And then they go and they're doing live streaming. And then everyone's like, man, look at these numbers. It's amazing. How many of these people are watching these worship services or whatever? And then all of these people are not coming back. And so when you have all of these people who are starting to think about like, what does the future of the church look like? And the interpretation that they're making of the circumstances and the data is the future of the church is online. And I think that's just the wrong interpretation. Not that we shouldn't be engaged online. I definitely think that the church belongs there. But I think when you're looking at all the different pieces of data and all the different things that we're looking at anthropologically within culture, we're making some really bad interpretations. And I think the same can be true for podcasting. The same can be true for small businessing. There's all these things happening, and our job in some ways is like in my field as a strategist is to like really interpret what it is that we're seeing so that we can put together some really practical, innovative plans for what the way forward looks like.
Okay, you have a story. I'm gonna keep on this track because you have a story in the book. I think it was towards the beginning of the book about a church you were working with. They've got some program that wasn't working, and wanted to know, how do we fix this? And you came in with kind of a bigger picture looking at the thing, and your question was, why are you even doing this? What purpose was it serving to begin with? That just really hit me, because when we see something, let's take podcasts, and we say, gosh, we're having a problem, not as many downloads or not as many whatever. How do you fix this? And obviously we don't all want to look at our business, our job, and question, gosh, should we be even doing this? So that's a relevant question, but maybe like you said, can we interpret it? Are we interpreting it differently? The way I was doing it doesn't work. How do I fix that? And you're coming along saying, maybe we shouldn't. How often is that the answer?
Yeah, I would say we're starting with the wrong question.
Okay.
The question, and just to be clear, I'm not the one coming up with all this stuff. Like, I think I'm really good at synthesizing.
You're the messenger. I'm giving you credit, buddy.
Well, sure. But I mean, like with this idea, I mean, like just read Simon Sinek. I mean, just like start with why. So it's like, hey, this program isn't working. How do we fix it? How is the wrong question? What is the wrong question? The right question is why. Like, why did we start this in the first place? What was the problem we were trying to solve? And this was the vehicle for that solution.
Yeah.
And so for podcasting, it's the exact same thing, where we're saying, okay, why did I start this thing in the first place? What was the original problem I was trying to solve? The question is not, how do I fix the podcast? If it's broken, I'm not saying it's broken. The question is, like, is it solving the original problem that I had? And if it is, then maybe like I can chill out. If it isn't, then maybe we need to start thinking about carving out a different path into our future, so that it continues to like do the thing that we need it to do. Like, what's the original why? What's the vision we originally had? And is this vehicle going to continue to be the delivery mechanism towards our vision?
Well, and even further, I pulled this out from you and from the book, is not only asking the why, but why this way. And to use podcasting as a muse, I am talking with a lot of folks about why are we, so we're doing it this way. Is there a different way we can do it? Is there something we can add on? Is there something we can do to make it unique? And there's so many. That's exciting. That feels resilient. It feels opportunity. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things, how many podcasts do you have?
3.
You have 3. So, I mean, like even within that, you're doing you're doing 3 different podcasts, which are delivering different methods of content. Even within that, you have the opportunity to experiment with some different things, or to launch a 4th podcast that could be a complete failure, but it gives you the point isn't whether or not it succeeds or fails. The point could be, it gives us the ability to try some new things without, like, we're creating a parallel path to things that have been successful and we hope continue to be successful. But what if we just had the ability to throw some stuff against the wall and try some different theories or ideas out that, like, it doesn't feel like we would rock the boat and the audience if we started messing around too much without knowing that the idea is going to work. I think that's one of the things that I see over and over again is that leaders do sometimes, is that they walk into something that it's not a sinking ship. It's just not doing what it was doing. And they sometimes walk in with a stick of dynamite and they just blow the whole thing up. Or they just don't do anything and eventually it does sink. Rather than, like, what if we just over here on the side where we're not going to create too many waves, let's try some stuff out. Let's experiment, knowing that most experiments don't work.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I want to take, I said I wasn't going to do this, and now I do want to talk about church specifically because I'm interested. Well, I'm interested in what you said because, to look at that. So I'll just give you my take, and I want to hear real world, but I think it's a great muse for us as we're all thinking about our own businesses and lives. So here's the church, and it's been, in my perspective, I grew up in the church, and it pretty much acts the same way. It's a building and you do it this way. You come in and there's worship and then there's a message and then everybody, for the most part, bolts afterwards. And there we go. So here comes the pandemic. We can't go. We have to interact online. Well, if I got to interact with my own church online, I'm now thinking, I can go listen to anybody. I can check out Andy Stanley. I know that guy. I mean, everybody likes that guy. Let's go listen to him. I can check out him. Now I'm listening to his stuff and he mentions somebody else. And next to the podcast that he has, it says people who like him also like, here's the next big name pastor who's got a best-selling book. So now I'm listening to them. Now I'm not listening to my local pastor as much, man. I realize I can listen to anybody around the world, man. This is awesome. So I got the family in, check this guy out or this lady out, and we're doing that. Now church opens up. What does it have to offer me? And you saying that their first reaction is just to go online. I'm thinking, how do you compete with that?
You can't.
Okay. Well, because it's gotten me thinking, man, the only thing that it has to offer is local engagement, community, the people right here where I live and work, because I can't go I'm not going to go and interact with Stanley's church in Atlanta, I think is where he is, or something like that. I'm in Colorado. I interact with people right here. That's where my best friends have come from, is from the church. And it's not even during the service. And it's in the foyer before or after, or saying, let's go out to eat afterwards. And so for you to say that, yeah, the church is talking about, we need to go online. I'm thinking, holy smokes. I don't see it at all.
Yeah, I think it's you do not want, you meaning the church, at a local level, like just your average church, does not want to get into a content arms race.
Yes.
With other churches who are more stocked to win that race. And I think it's in some way, it should be a shaking moment in a good way.
Okay.
Where it's like, maybe we have built the church on to be like a content delivery service through the vehicle of like the sermons on Sundays or whatever. I do think that this is where, again, we can make observations, but interpretations really matter.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, what the last 18 months has shown is that you've got a lot of people who at some point have been involved in local church whose lives look absolutely nothing like the life of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that should be really, I think, jarring and disturbing to leaders of churches, and the things that they have been doing. Like, are we a social club with a little bit of like Christian feel goodness sprinkled on top, or are we something different? And I think we just have to be really honest about whether or not the things that we're doing are designed to do what we need them to do. And I mean, there's a great quote that a lot of people have heard before, which is like, everything is perfectly designed to get the results that it's getting.
Deming, yeah.
The church is perfectly designed to get the dumpster fire that has been the last 18 months of what we have been seeing. I mean, Facebook is on fire in the comment section. It's just disgusting. for everyone. I don't mean just like for Christians, but I mean like everyone. It's disgusting, and us included. And so I think we have to be honest about what the church is right now, and that we do not want to get into the content arms race if for no other reason that it doesn't work. We already know that like just hearing content week after week after week after week doesn't work. I think increasingly the church needs to make a shift from being a teaching center to a training center, where the real like life delivery system is going to happen in how we're equipping people, not in whether or not we can do like content downloads or just waterboarding by content, which is what we like. You just named it. Like there are so many people who have exceptional content that I just have at my fingertips at any point, but they are not going to come and walk with me in my life.
Yeah.
That's what the local church has the opportunity to do.
I like that. Teaching, we can get anywhere, but training, hands-on, engaged training, coaching even. I mean, coaching is a huge, this is the Ziglar show. I mean, coaching is big. We got a lot of coaches here. Ziglar as a corporation does a lot of coaching. They teach and train coaches. So coaching is big. And that's one where I see, we did a show recently on the benefits of live events. Now that live events are opening up back up again, what are the benefits? And it was that, content, it's hard to compete there because you can get it online, but man, you cannot engage and say, okay, here's what's happening with me. What do you think? You can't have accountability.
No.
Yeah.
We talk about all the time, and some of the work that we do is that transformation really comes when you have the marriage of event and process. And so if event has the ability to stir someone, they have a revelation about something, they feel their heart or their mind or their body stirred towards something, that won't change them. It just gives them awareness that something should change. But if you have a process to kind of catch them around whatever has been stirred, and that we can call that accountability, we can call that training, we can call that equipping, we can call that, I mean, like I can realize like, man, I should really be exercising differently. Thus, I need a personal trainer who's going to hold me accountable, because I have 20 years to tell me that I don't have, for whatever reason, the willpower it takes to just do it by myself. Then that's how we should be thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think, from a church standpoint of, okay, we could just turn them all into AA meetings. For different topics, whether it's the financial AA, the Dave Ramsey financial, AA type gathering, but where we can come alongside. That does feel like the opportunity. Well, let me ask you on that. You talked about, to take this into business at large, you talked about churches, you talked about small groups, and you wrote about that and about looking at that and coming to the realization. And I thought you were going to diss it at first, but I don't think you did really. And you said, gosh, really what they were created for was to try to help retention, try to keep people from leaving church. And I thought you were going to diss that, but if I'm correct, you didn't. You said, no, that's a viable reason. I mean, if you can't keep them there, you can't help them. You can't minister to them. So that's viable, but that's never on the table as first. And you actually ranked it first.
I think this goes back to like everything's designed for a particular result. Small groups were designed to be relational flypaper. It was, you might have been attracted to a worship service for a particular reason, and eventually you will leave if you don't have friends in a community that are going on this journey with you. It's that simple. And that's why small groups were started. But what's happened over time is we've realized, well, the people who are attending or going through our programming, their lives are not dramatically changing. That's a problem. They're not engaging with people who they aren't already friends with. That's a problem. So they're not living as a mobilized people. What if small groups were the vehicle to deliver this and this and this? And it became sort of like the kitchen sink approach. And the problem is they weren't designed to do those things. And so they've been weighed down by all these other things that they were supposed to do. It needs to do discipleship, and it needs to do mission, and it needs to do justice, and it needs, and they weren't designed for that. And increasingly we see them weighted down and bogged down by expectations for things that they were never designed to do.
Well, we're back to you calling us to be aware. What are we doing? And asking that question, why? What is the purpose? I want to take, Doug, some of your salt of the earth businesses and ask you your thoughts on innovation with them, because we're not used to seeing it. And I can see some people out there questioning, really, is there a place for innovation, a need for innovation here? Let's look at a restaurant. Actually, I pulled out restaurant, plumbing, and carpet cleaning. I mean, those are kind of businesses that you think, well, let's take out the pandemic. Now, I know that did change some restaurants, but today, by far and large, at least in my little town, looks like they're back to normal. I mean, it's a restaurant, it serves X, whatever kind of food, has whatever kind of ambiance, and people are coming in. Same thing, plumbing. They do what they do when they're building a house. They do what you do when you have a problem and you call them in. Carpet cleaning, you clean your carpets. Are those, how should those folks with businesses such as that be looking at innovation when it's probably easy to think, man, it's been the same since the dawn of time?
Yes, I think obviously you're trying to bring about disruption in things that feel like what you just said, like they've kind of been this way since the dawn of time. And I think there's a Clayton Christensen. He wrote what Steve Jobs says was the most important business book he ever read. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma. I think it came out in 1997. And I actually got to, he died early last year, but I got to interview him about 3 years ago for the book.
Wow. Okay.
As it turns out, he was a Harvard business professor. And I was like, it can't hurt to just email him and see, like, would he be willing to have a conversation? And the worst thing you can do is say no. And he wrote back, I was like, sure. Which was great. And so I got to talk about, but he talked about how disruption, which leads to innovation. There are three ways in businesses that happens: a disruptive price point, a disruptive practice, or a disruption into a new market. So like when you think about like a disruptive practice, that could be confusing. Like think about Netflix, like the move from DVD to streaming. It's introducing something brand new that hasn't been really invented yet. That's what Netflix was doing.
Yeah.
The price point, Disney Plus, thinking about streaming, has a really disruptive price point. It's $5 or $5.95 or something. Like, it's really low for what it is that they're doing in the streaming service. And then you've got it completely flopped, but you've got Quibi, which was a streaming service that was going to deliver episodes that were 9 minutes or less.
Really? Okay.
It's crazy when you think about it. But they were like, look, there are people who are 17 and younger. This is the demographic we're trying to reach. And so when you think about plumbing, or you think about carpet cleaning or things like that, is there a new product that you can launch that is brand new, that will do something that no one has ever seen before? Is there a new market that we can tap into that currently, like, most people aren't tapping into? Or is there a price point that we can offer, which means that we're going to have to innovate in the business model that we have? And so some of the times when we're working with businesses or nonprofits, NGOs, things like that, we've got exercises or models that we're helping them think through those three things to bring disruption to those in those different areas.
Well, and it feels, you're kind of in that question, that age-old business question, if it's not broke, do you break it? And of course, you had the contrarian view of, if it's not broke, break it. And we're kind of in that. But my gosh, when you look at, so I'm in a little mountain town. We just had a new car wash open up. I expected it was actually, I think it was John Acuff who was talking on a show we did or something like that. And he started talking about this car wash that came into town, and it was an all you can do car wash. So for however much money, you can go as many times. And he just loved it. He got it, membership for his wife, and how awesome. I literally thought I just assumed, because I thought that's the innovative thing. That's what this car wash will be. Well, it's not. It's like $15 to go through, and it's not that. And I'm not using it. And I actually just thought, my wife goes down to the Springs, Colorado Springs a couple times a week. I'm just going to get her a membership at one of those there. That's innovation, but that's something. Let's say you are the guy with the car wash that's doing well. I feel like we're in that day and age where we've got to expect that somebody's going to come along with a better mount. Just to what you said, name those three places again. Price point. What were the other two?
A price point, a product, or a market where you can break into that there currently isn't market penetration.
Yeah. Somebody's going to come along with a USP, a unique selling proposition that's going to eclipse
Yeah.
yours if you don't have. Well, does it also then call us to really question what we're doing if we look at businesses again or churches or whatever and ask that question of what are we doing? Even if we're doing okay, what are we doing to have people come here and choose to give us their money as opposed to somebody else? And what would take them away? Because don't we all somewhat expect that we think we're doing a good job and we expect loyalty, that then when that new one of those three things comes along, we realize, man, they're not that loyal.
Yeah. I that will happen. That does happen. Every entrepreneur, every business owner, everyone has experienced that if you've been in the business field where that happens, and it can feel really gutting. And I think the thing for us just to remember is that's coming again. Like that new thing where disruption is coming for your business, where things are going to get hard again. That's just around the corner. And so let's not be surprised by it. Let's plan on it. And so one of the things that we do when we're working with businesses is just to help them think through what percentage of your finances can you put aside where you're going to be experimenting and tinkering, because that is a way of thinking about, like, what if disruption didn't happen to you? What if you were the disruptor? And again, this is a way of planning, and I think in a very prudent, wise way as a business owner. I mean, I think one of the things that Adam Grant talks about, he wrote, I mean, he's written a number of books. He had a new one come out. What my favorite is called Originals. And he talks about how sometimes we think about entrepreneurs as the greatest risk takers. His point, and I just love this, he said, entrepreneurs, the best ones, are the best risk mitigators. They're the ones who actually who are, because of the way that they're proactively thinking about things, they're constantly trying to think to cycle out the risk because of the choices that they're making. And so if we know that disruption is coming, no matter what, then we should be building into our business practices and our business finances ways that we're thinking through how we can innovate, even if it's small things that we can filter into our business so that we can be the people who disrupt rather than the people who are disrupted.
Well, your book is really centered around these 5 different areas, and that you just mentioned. I mean, your first one is identification. And it got me initially thinking about, okay, identify what the problem we're trying to solve, or that other thing, or the problem that hasn't come along yet that we're trying to, I guess, is it fair to say then to predict?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And it doesn't mean that, and I think this is the thing, it doesn't mean that we have to move for the sake of moving. Like we have to change for the sake of change. But it's like, this goes back to like the brand loyalty question that you were talking about a few minutes ago. Do we know our customers well enough to know the way in which like their needs are changing? Because if our job is to serve their needs in such a way that like they continue to have a really high satisfaction with what it is that we're providing, as their needs and desires change, that means that what we're providing, their satisfaction levels are going to drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of what our services are. So like, some of this is like, how well do we know our customer? Do we know our customer from 5 years ago, or do we know our customer from today? And I think that's a really important thing for us to think about. Is most of us are really familiar with the customer when we first started, but are we just as plugged in with their needs, hopes, wants, desires today as we were when we first started?
It's kind of it feels like a requirement we have to, even in the best times, we've got to up our game, because I love what you said there. In essence, what we're providing is going to become the norm to people. And what are we going to do? That can be frustrating, but it's just the world. I mean, you mentioned Steve Jobs earlier. I mean, he was, of course, famous for saying people don't know what they want. It's our job to figure out what they want, what they're going to want, what they might want, and then innovate. And of course, I think Apple, I'm a fan of Apple, admittedly, but they do a pretty great job of coming along and innovating things that I didn't even know that I wanted. And here they've come and they provide it. Now everybody else has to keep pace.
I mean, I think he's right and wrong.
Okay.
I mean, I think sometimes when you're like, he had the benefit of talking about that as it related to technology.
Yeah.
He is, at the end of the day, he was stewarding a company that was inventing things.
True.
And like, take your plumber again, or your carpet cleaner. I think sometimes what we want is a clean carpet. We don't want a new way of thinking about flooring. The thing that we want is a clean carpet. Now, every once in a while, you're going to be able to like invent new flooring. Like, I wonder what it was like when like the first person invented faux wood floors.
Right.
Where you're like, what if it didn't have to be as expensive, and it cleaned easier, and it didn't dent, and. But a carpet cleaner isn't inventing those things. If you're a small business owner, they're doing something different. And so I do think it is the alchemy sometimes of having a picture for what people want that they don't know that they want yet.
Yeah.
As well as like satisfaction for customers is really important.
Yeah.
And
True.
making sure that like we're delivering on what it is that they really say that they want, and we're doing it in smooth, efficient, brand loyal ways.
Yeah. I am grateful for whoever developed whatever chemical that makes the carpet stain free, or, that I've got a carpet that doesn't have stains after whatever, 12 years we've been in the house. So identification though, problem you're trying to solve or stay ahead of and predict. The next thing is ideation. And you had on there, it's new habits and tactics and strategies. This makes me think again about that. Well, back to what you said earlier, these are muscles we've got to be keeping fit. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And I mean, like, let's use your podcast as an example. I think one of the things that you can do with ideation is, usually when we're thinking about ideation, we're just like, all right, you're going to get a group of people, you're going to get around a whiteboard, and you're just going to brainstorm.
Right.
And that's fine. But there are like some essential practices that you can learn. There are, in fact, books that you can buy that will teach you how to do ideation really, really well. Like, one of them is called Game Storming. And it's, I mean, for folks who are interested in the idea of ideation and how you could construct ideas out of very random things, this book called Game Storming is super fun. Some of this is like, what if you took, it's mashing things together and asking like, what would happen if you put these things together? And so like, if I were to put like podcasting, and what's your favorite TV show right now?
Favorite TV show? Man, the last one I saw was, I watched a little bit of The Stand. It was The
Stand.
Stephen King. I like the depiction of good. I read it as a kid. Well, not a kid, young adult. And so I've watched some episodes of that.
So if you were to really say like, hey, what would happen if we put like your favorite parts of The Stand and a podcast together and we smushed it up, what would come out of it? Mm-hmm. If we were to put together your favorite experience of Netflix in a podcast, what would come out of it? If you were a 17-year-old, I mean, like, and it's just thinking through, I talk about this in the book. When you have been successful at something, it is exceptionally difficult to see other ways of doing it. And so what do you have? You've got, Kevin, what, 45 million downloads?
52.
Is that right? 52 million. Man, I really cheated you there. Like, from a podcast perspective, like, I'm not saying you're the top of the charts, like you already said that, but like, you've been successful at this thing. Yeah. It's the more successful you are, the harder it is to see other ways of doing it.
Interesting.
And so you can't, it's called the curse of knowledge.
Yeah.
You cannot assume that you're just going to be able to think of new ways of doing it by like it's going to organically happen. You have to tackle this as a really intentional pursuit. If I want to envision the future of what my podcast could be, or let's take a couple of steps back, that it's not about podcasting, it's about content delivery, or let's take a couple of steps back, it's about changing people's motives. What are the different mechanisms we could do for doing that? And I'm assuming like that would also be financially viable for me and my family.
Right.
You have to really go after that because you've been so successful at it. Any change, ideation thing is about like, we're not going to trip into new ways of doing it. We're going to have to really think through how we do that on purpose.
Well, your next one, and you've talked about this. You know what, Doug, if you're hearing me, I got something going wrong here. Give me just a second. You hearing me, Doug?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Give me just a second. Something,
Yeah, it froze up for like 45 seconds.
yeah, it did. Let me, let's see, I'm going to keep that up. Just trying to discern which end it was on. Okay, I'm seeing you live again here, but yeah, something's, I can't tell. It gave me an internet problem, but my computer looks like it's wigging out a little bit too. Can I ask you, well, I'm going to pop out and come back in.